Welcome to Torah Today Ministries. My name is Grant Luton.
And I'm Robin.
And we're here to discuss Torah portions, Tazria and Metzora. These two Torah portions often go together, as they do this year, and these portions cover Leviticus 12 through 15. And probably, if you ask people, what is your least favorite part of the Torah, this is exactly what they'd point to.
The scabs and the white skin
Yeah,
and
and
checking
the
the
ooze
hairs and it's so it appears so strange
Well, the reason...
and foreign. Yes.
I like the word icky when I come to this portion, because everything here is kind of icky and gross, but that's for a good reason, because everything we're discussing here when it comes to leprosy is a picture of sin. It's a picture. Leprosy is not sin, but it's a picture of sin, and sin is pretty gross.
Pretty gross, yeah.
So,
well, as we approach this double portion, my prayer has been that we can truly uncover a bit, at least, of the spirit of this instruction and not just get stuck on the letter of this instruction.
right.
Because the letter of the law in this case really does present as icky and irrelevant and not real applicable. So that's when we get more interested than ever and realize there has to be something here for us that we need to understand. But Grant, before we go any further, I want to mention that our calendar today reminds us that today is Yom HaShoah.
Yes.
And it's the day of remembrance for those who
Suffered in the Holocaust.
suffered in the Holocaust. And you talk about something that doesn't seem to make any sense. And we have to lean in and trust our Creator that at the end of the day, even that suffering will make sense. And I'm also reminded that we mustn't ever boast against the root and the people of Israel, because we're grafted into them. So as we come to this portion, I feel like a foreigner trying to understand something that is too really lofty, but we're going to try.
Yes. I'm reminded of a flight to Israel years ago, and I was sitting next to a very, very godly Orthodox Jewish man. And we got in a conversation, and the flight just, no pun intended, flew by because we so enjoyed talking. And I asked him the question about the Holocaust. And I said, what are your thoughts on this? His name was Yitzhak. I said, Yitzhak, what are your thoughts? Why did the Holocaust happen? And he looked at me and says, if I could understand God, I would need to find a better God.
Right.
And but one of the things we do know, and it really aligns with our opening of this Torah portion, is that the Holocaust was like birth pains for the nation of Israel.
Truly.
And if the Holocaust hadn't happened, Israel probably would not be a nation. But because it did happen, the attitudes and the hearts of the national leaders in the UN aligned to the point to where they voted to allow Israel to have its sovereignty, to return to its country, become a sovereign nation.
Right.
And what does our Torah portion open with?
I know, it's
birth.
Tazria, which is birth, conceived, conception.
Yeah.
And last week we talked about how the mother and father of our master Yeshua, when he was born in this world, and he was taken to the temple, as is described here in the Torah. It was after his mother Miriam had set aside those days of purification.
Yes.
So he was indeed circumcised on the 8th day, which we talked about last Torah portion, and that meant a new thing, a new birth, a new life. But then, as our Torah portion describes, when a woman gives birth to a male child, she's unclean for those first 7 days, and then she shall remain in the blood of her purification for 33 days. But then it describes how if she gives birth to a girl, then she is considered in the blood of her purification for twice that, or 66 days. Right?
I think you Yes.
Okay. All right.
I'm not doing the math very well in my
So the reason I
head.
bring this up is because I remember my first exposure to this portion thinking, well, it appears that a girl is considered more tainted than a boy. And that as women, we've been cursed with these bodies that we cannot control the kind of, leakage that, that occurs. And so we are set apart and considered unclean and impure. And it's a chauvinistic evidence of how girls are just.
That's how it is
right.
often perceived.
So
yes.
you clear this up for us.
Well, I think the clarification is pretty simple once you see it.
It is.
It's not that girls make a woman twice as impure. What happens with the birth of a boy is that the impurity is cut in half. What makes the woman impure is the shedding of blood. And we read more about that in the second Torah portion of this week's reading. And so with a girl, there's blood shed during the birth, so this makes the woman ritually impure. When she gives birth to a boy, there's also blood shed during the birth process. But here's something interesting.
It's
on
half.
the 8th day of the little boy's life, he too sheds blood when he is circumcised. And so what we see here, somehow, the blood that is shed by this little boy at his circumcision helps to compensate the woman's impurity. It's like the innocence of this little boy. His bloodshed reduces the impurity of his mother. The little girls aren't circumcised, so there's no bloodshed.
And that is a huge subject that we could spend a year talking
Absolutely.
about. But I'm hoping that just mentioning that this doesn't mean, ritually impurity doesn't mean that she's unclean and should stay away from her community.
No. Back in the time when this was written, there was a tabernacle standing. And there are some people who have such misguided notions that they think, if a woman is having her period, she can't attend services,
or sit on a chair.
She can't be a part of anything that goes on.
It's pretty bizarre.
But the key to this is found at the very end of our pair of Torah portions in Leviticus 15, verse 31. It says, "You shall separate the children of Israel from their contamination, and they shall not die as a result of their contamination if they contaminate my tabernacle that is among them." So there was a tabernacle. God's house was here on earth. It was in the middle of the camp. And so ritual purity laws were extremely vital and important.
Well, Yeshua himself would go to mikvah before entering the temple. So
Everyone
there
had to.
was a rite, if you will, of just symbolizing making yourself ritually pure.
Right. So today, since there's no tabernacle, no temple, no priesthood, every single person on the planet is ritually impure. But again, ritual impurity is not sin. What it is, it's something God had established to give us a picture of purity, of holiness, of the contrast between sinfulness and righteousness. It's all pictures, 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 symbols, symbols, symbols. But take, for example, the most impure thing you can touch is a dead body.
Exactly.
And if you touch a dead body, you become ritually impure, and you are impure till sundown. Then you wash your garments, you immerse, and then you can become pure again.
But on the other hand, one of the greatest mitzvahs is to prepare a dead body for burial.
So by fulfilling this great mitzvah of preparing a dead body, you realize I'm making myself ritually impure, but it's for a very high cost. So it's not, again, ritual impurity is not sin.
Okay.
It's a picture of how sinfulness separates us, how death separates us. And the Israelites became active participants in living out these pictures.
And a woman has the honor of picturing how the world
Yes.
itself will go through birth pangs before its final redemption. And we have this honor of being allowed and permitted
Yes.
to rest after bringing new life into the world. This was
Right.
a gift for a woman.
It was. And what's interesting
If
is
only our culture would say, you just take it easy
Yeah.
for 66 days.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know?
And talking about pictures, when Eve sinned, what were the consequences? Now, God did not curse Adam and Eve. He cursed the serpent and he cursed the ground. But he did assign consequences to Adam and Eve, and the consequences were pain. And for the woman, she would have pain in childbirth. So why did he assign this? Because the moment she sinned and Adam followed her and they brought sin into the world, God in his infinite wisdom knew that the restoration of the world through the coming of Messiah and establishing of his kingdom would be preceded by pain.
Right.
So the coming of Messiah and the correction of everything and the Garden of Eden being restored on earth would be preceded by pain. So he assigned the woman that every time you bring new life into the world, it will be preceded by pain.
And those
so you
pains,
live out this
right, and those
this
pains will
picture.
become more intense and closer together as we get closer and closer to the actual
Exactly. Birth
which
pains.
we're experiencing in the world now, I believe.
Yeah.
But that's a big subject.
So circling back
Right.
to where we started here in Leviticus 12, what we see here is when the woman brought forth her son, the blood of the son did away with her impurity.
Okay.
And that's a picture of the birth of the Son, that's Yeshua. What happens is that we receive purity through his shed blood. It's an amazing picture. And it's
is.
all encoded into the scriptures here.
So then moving on to chapter 13 in Leviticus,
Yes.
we start to see that God allowed his people to be plagued with a physical disease of the soul that manifests itself in the flesh.
Yes.
So I put that incorrectly. He gave them a way that their flesh would manifest a problem in their
well
soul.
put.
And so that appears to be a terrible affliction. And the Zeras isn't anything like the leprosy that we have in our world today. It isn't true leprosy. It was a very unique thing. And can you imagine if every time you had an impure thought or inclination, you would have some kind of breakout on your skin? It would be really horrific, wouldn't
Yes, it would.
But that's what was going on here.
Yeah. Well, imagine in a community where God dwells so tangibly in their midst, and there's such a level of holiness that whenever sin did appear, it was revealed, as you said, in a person's skin, in their very body.
It was handled.
And there was a way to handle it.
And this particular sin that would manifest itself with this affliction called Zeras was primarily the sin of evil speech.
Yes, Lashon Hara.
Lashon Hara. And this is where we're going to camp out for a while.
Yes.
Because we need to understand just how dangerous and ugly the sin of evil speech is in our lives.
Yes. Yeah, this is a traditional belief in Judaism. And you can find scriptures that support it, of course. But the primary cause of zarat, which is translated leprosy in our English translations, its primary cause was Lashon Hara, evil speech.
Well, does that explain then the incident with Miriam, Aaron's sister, where she is suddenly plagued with Zeras and she has to be set apart outside the camp for a time? She had committed evil speech against her brother Moses.
And she was struck with leprosy immediately.
Right.
Yeah.
So it does and can happen to all. But what we have to look at is why the tongue and evil speech is so powerful. We talked about how silence is valued when we had our discussion last time, This time we're talking about when you do speak, make sure that it's life-giving
Yes.
and not derogatory.
Well, the power of life and death is in the tongue.
It truly is. And we say that so often that we forget how true it is.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it was here in one of our Parsing the Portion teachings that I shared this, but recently I shared it with someone that, the serpent is the one who introduced sin in the garden. And through his speech, his evil speech, he seduced Eve and Adam into rebelling against God, into sinning. Well, think of a serpent for a moment. How does it explore its environment?
With its tongue.
With its tongue. Its eyesight is not all that great, but it sticks its tongue out. It wiggles around. And that's how it picks up the infrared from the things around it and explores after its tongue. And a person who practices evil speech is a one who explores his environment and explores and detects what kind of people wants to hang with by misuse of its tongue. In other words, gossips like to hang with other gossips.
Right.
A gossip doesn't like to hang with someone who doesn't share in their gossip because they're just no fun. But they explore for their environment and they test people and they want to figure out where they can inject their poison into people because they always have their tongues out, always wiggling around, exploring around them and crawling in the dust.
Well, going back to the garden, Grant, the thing that sets humankind apart from the rest of the animal kingdom, when God breathed into man and he became a living soul in God's own image, is the fact that we have speech.
Yes.
I mean, the rest of the animal kingdom does
Right.
not have speech. And so we have been entrusted with this powerful ability to create things and to connect and to
That's
praise and to instruct. But at the same time, we also have the power to bring death with our tongue.
Tongue is something that's powerful, like fire. It's powerful for great good and it's powerful for great destruction.
I was reading something this week. It was so interesting to me about the tongue itself is the only organ. Let's think about it. We have internal organs that you can't see, like our lungs and our kidneys and our heart. And then we have external organs like our ears and our nose and our eyes that are visible. But the tongue is the only part that is both internal and external. It's like the connection point between the internal world, the external world,
Exactly right.
the invisible world, and the physical world. And God's given us two gates to guard this important organ. He's given us our teeth, which is like a gate, and our lips, which is like a gate. And the word has so much to say about guarding our tongue. I spent the morning in James chapter 3. And I think I need to read that every single day of my life. And then and only then am I safe to remove the duct tape that I feel like I need to wrap around my head half the time to guard myself. You know, I've come to this place in my life where I've both been the recipient of evil speech and I've committed evil speech. And I think I'm reaching this place where I feel worse when I commit it. Those are the nights I lay awake, just regretting things I've said that I know have hurt other people. I can't stand it.
Oh, I know.
And so I'm becoming more and more aware of how important it is to be a guardian of our tongue.
Well, silence is golden. That's for sure.
In Psalm 120, verse 4, it was fascinating when I read that slanderous words are compared to two things: sharp arrows of a warrior and the coals that are part of a broom or like flax. And the reason is because when you shoot an arrow, it can be shot at a great distance and still be deadly. You don't even have to be close.
Exactly right.
I mean, our words can inflict death even from miles away. Like half a world away, we can inflict harm, especially in the day of social media where every word is publicized and made public like immediately. And then it's also like a flax, like a part of a broom that even once it's blown out, so to speak, and you think it's extinguished, it continues to smolder and smolder and smolder and smolder, and you really don't put it out, do you? The after effects go on and on.
Yeah.
It's just a...
Well, the sages often say it's more merciful just to take a gun out and shoot somebody and kill them than it is to gossip about them. Because when you shoot them, you're just killing their bodies, and we're all going to die anyway. But when you gossip, you destroy their character, and that destruction goes on after their death. Their character, their reputation is still damaged because of your evil speech. You know, we were discussing on Shabbat here at home Psalm 27, and what you just said reminded me of the place where David is talking about how he's surrounded by evildoers who want to devour his flesh.
Right.
And that idiom for devouring is in verse 2. When evildoers came upon me to devour my flesh. Well, he wasn't surrounded by cannibals, but that idiom to devour one's flesh is an idiom that refers to gossip.
Yeah.
Assassinating someone with your speech. They say it's like ripping him limb from limb and devouring his raw flesh.
Yeah, I'll take sticks and stones any day.
Yes.
That old saying is so ridiculous because words do hurt.
Yeah.
So much more.
You're feeding on someone else's destruction.
Yeah.
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 Well, let's talk about this disease,
Yes.
which is not actually a medical condition. When the biggest mistake we can make when we read about zarat, or I'll use the word leprosy, even though this isn't really leprosy. The biggest mistake we can make is thinking this is some kind of medical condition. It is not a medical condition. It's a spiritual condition that manifests in the physical realm.
Right.
So here's some things, some of them be very surprising, but all of these are based on our two Torah portions here. First of all, only the visible skin was examined by the priest. You know, when you go to the doctor and you're sick, the doctor may say, well, you need to disrobe and sit on the table. The priest doesn't say disrobe. He would look at the exposed skin, the hands, the face, the feet. And here's the other thing that might be shocking. Leprosy was not contagious. I'll say that again. Leprosy was not contagious.
Then why were they sent outside the camp?
Because they were ritually unclean. You could become ritually unclean from touching a leper, but you did not catch the leprosy from touching the leper.
But the gossip is
what,
contagious.
It's what comes from inside the man that pollutes him, that poisons him. And Yeshua said that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so when a person speaks out gossip and evil speech, where does it come from? His heart. And so it's not from the outside that I'm tainted. It's from what's inside that I'm tainted, by allowing it to pollute me, by speaking forth evil speech.
And to pollute others.
Right. Now, there's no medical treatment for leprosy. You can read all through every verse of these Torah portions. You're not going to find a single treatment to make the leprosy go away. There's nothing there. It does talk about what you do if and when it does go away, when your body does heal, but there's nothing prescribed to make it go away. There was always understood that repentance is the only thing that would help.
Right.
Now, if you're still not convinced this is not a medical condition, you have to realize that not only can it affect your flesh, it can affect your clothing, it can affect your furniture, and it can affect the walls of your house. All of these things can also get leprosy. So this is not a medical condition. And what I find so interesting here is that it's not leprosy until the very moment that the priest looks at it and pronounces it's leprosy. At that moment, the person goes from being clean to being unclean. Mm-hmm. And when the leprosy goes away, he's still impure until the priest sees it and pronounces, you're now clean. At that moment, it becomes clean. So what we see here is that leprosy is tied directly to the proclamation of the priest.
Right.
So this is an important lesson, if I can take a little rabbi trail. You know, we can look at our lives and we can look at the lives of others, and we do it more than we should. And we can say, oh, that's impure, that's unclean, that's leprosy, or, oh, that's fine, that's good. But it doesn't depend on your opinion as to whether it's something sinful or something good.
It's his standard.
It depends only, yes, it depends only on the word of our high priest, Yeshua, through as he lives out the word of God. That is what determines, not how you feel, not what you think, not your opinion. It's only by the speech, by the word of God, that leprosy is leprosy or it's not.
And that priest, as explained in our portion as well, would go outside the camp himself.
Yes.
In order to meet that
Right.
person where they were.
Yeah.
Once they had been isolated
Right.
and separated, to declare them once again
Yeah.
clean.
Yeah, and I find it interesting, and there are a couple more items here on the list, but I find it interesting that when a person was diagnosed with leprosy by the priest, he wouldn't be sent out into a far country, but then he couldn't stay in the camp either. He would stay right around the outside edges of the camp, right outside the walls, outside what's the word I'm looking for? The boundaries of the camp. And you know, I see believers who often wonder, how come I'm just outside the boundaries? I want to get close to people, but I'm always just kind of on the outside. One of the reasons might be is that you are using evil speech.
Well, that is the thing.
It isolates you.
That is the thing that became so evident as I was pondering this portion the last few days, is that falsehood separates.
Yes.
Truth makes us one. It makes us
Exactly.
one with the Father. It makes us one with
Absolutely.
others. You cannot draw close to a person who is not true.
Yeah.
You just cannot.
Well, it says there in John, if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship one with the other. Well, the light is always the truth. And if you have two people walking in truth, we have true fellowship, real fellowship. But, you know, I heard someone yesterday, someone in the news who I admire, and he said that, you know, when you have truth and you have falsehood, only falsehood can compromise. Falsehood can compromise and start making progress towards the truth. But the moment truth compromises, it's falsehood.
Exactly.
And so a person of truth cannot compromise that, or else they become false themselves. We have to stand in truth.
You know, I was thinking about those things as well. And you know how it feels, Grant, when you're with someone and they're continually or even occasionally speaking about others in an unkind way and just degrading others and diminishing others. It starts to become clear that this is not a person you want to trust.
Right.
Because they will obviously do the same to you. And I was thinking about how when we use our tongue and we're trying to send our praise heavenward to God, but that same tongue has been degrading and demoralizing other people.
Yes.
God looks at us and says, how can I trust that your praise to me is true? You are not a true person.
Right.
A true person does not use bitter words and sweet words with the same tongue.
Yeah. Yeah, a fountain can't give forth sweet waters and bitter waters at the same time.
Maybe this is why in Psalm 8 we read that out of the mouth of infants
Yes.
there's perfect praise.
Yeah, it's perfection.
Because when's the last time you heard an infant gossip about someone? There's no ego there.
No.
They don't have a need to diminish another in order to build themselves up, even for a half a second. Their cry is just true to who they are.
It's just pure.
It's pure.
Yeah. Well, I want to mention two other things about leprosy. This next one's very bizarre. A person completely covered with leprosy from head to toe was considered pure.
That is so weird.
Isn't that weird? That's in chapter 13, verses 12 and 13.
Can you explain that?
I can do my best. I think it has to do with the principle of lukewarmness, where Yeshua says there in Revelation 4:3, he says, "I rather have you hot or cold." Those are preferable. But if you're lukewarm, because you're lukewarm, I'll spew you out of my mouth. So a person who has no leprosy and a person who's completely covered with leprosy represent the people who are hot and the people who are cold.
But it's clear.
But when you have the mixture, you have some healthy flesh and you have some leprous flesh, that's the person who has to go live outside the camp. You're basically spewed out of the camp.
And you're going to find out who you are.
Yes. Now, so why, again, is a person who's completely covered with leprosy, why are they considered pure? It's like when I meet a person who's a really righteous person, they're not dangerous to be around. They're a joy to be around.
Yes.
And a person who's completely wicked, he's no joy to be around, but if he's utterly wicked,
they're not a threat.
He's not dangerous
Right.
morally to me because his life is so repulsive. If anything, it's a warning to me to never be like that.
And don't get close enough to be hurt.
But the person who is kind of righteous, but they want to mix that with impurity and unrighteousness and wickedness, that's a person who's dangerous because they mix truth and falsehood. And that is how the enemy seduced Adam and Eve, and that is how he seduces people today. He'll take truth, but he'll mix falsehood in with it, and that is the poison.
It's so discouraging, though, because we all slip, and like James 3:8 says, no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil and full of deadly poison. So then where's our hope?
Yeah.
Well, our hope is reading down further in the same chapter to verse 17, where it says, wisdom from above is pure and peaceable. And what that word peaceable means is willing to yield.
Yes.
And if we're willing to yield and get better and see what we have done as dangerous and wicked, and to tame it and to work on it and to repent of it, there is hope for us.
There is.
There is hope for us. And then we're without hypocrisy, that verse says. It's the hypocrisy that is dangerous.
Absolutely.
When you're trying to present as one thing, but then, like you said, you're full of good words and bad words, and you're not safe to be close to.
That's right. Yeah, that's so dangerous. Which brings up the last point about leprosy. If and when you did recover from leprosy, and the priest says, okay, you're pure, one of the first things you have to do is bring a sin offering. Because that leprosy was a manifestation of sin in your life. So I hope, I just looked at the clock and my goodness, we've already hit the 33-minute mark. But I hope that people, our listeners, as they go through these Torah portions, they will pray over what they read.
Right.
And ask, what does this teach me about sin in my life? What is pictured here that I can learn from? And the dangers of sin in my life. We all tend to think we understand sin. But when we read this, if we don't understand what we're reading here, we probably don't understand sin. Because sin, like the enemy itself, is very devious. It's very complex. And it can really deceive us in so many ways. And these passages, if we'll take the time to labor over them, can teach us so much about sin.
It helps to remember that God is light and in him is no darkness. And he's also truth. He's pure truth. And as people who are supposed to be image bearers, he's calling us to be true people. Not people who can just quote things that are true, but he wants us to be true people.
Yes. Well, if people will suffer along with me here for a second, I would like to take about a minute and a half and bring out 5 things about leprosy that are found in chapter 13, which is the most difficult chapter in the portion, that will help us see and understand more how these things picture sin. So in verses 18 to 23, we learn that old inflammations are a potential site for leprosy. In other words, old sins that have healed up and you've recovered from are still a potential weak point where sin can once again manifest itself.
Like those scars can come back to haunt us.
Number 2, in verses 24 to 28, we find old burns are a potential site for leprosy. In other words, we've all been burned.
Yeah.
We've all been burned by people, probably by churches, by groups, by family members.
By people we thought were friends.
And we think it's healed up. Okay, it's all healed. But that old burn mark is a potential site for leprosy to flare up again. Number 3, verses 29 and 30. Hidden leprosy is still leprosy. Hidden leprosy is still leprosy. You may think no one else sees it, and maybe they don't, but it's still there, and you know it. Number 4, verses 31 to 37. And the hidden leprosy is the most embarrassing kind. And as you read it, you'll see what I mean by that. And number 5, verses 38 to 44. Eczema is eczema. Baldness is baldness. In other words, not every single rash you get on your skin is leprosy. We need to be very careful that we don't look at another person's life and detect a flaw and think, oh, they're sinful. That we are not the priest. We are not the ones who pronounce leprosy. We are not the ones who diagnosed it. God does. And he pronounces it through his word. And you and I, unless we are in a position of authority that God has placed us in, we have no business looking at someone else and saying, oh, they've got sin in their life. It's clear as a bell to me.
If anything,
no, it isn't.
There should be compassion and intercession, right?
Yes. And those things are also addressed in these portions. How do we treat the leper? And how is the leper supposed to present himself? And there's so many amazing insights here into sin and its consequences in these icky chapters.
Well, there's an ancient saying. It says, before you speak, you're the master of your words. In other words, you have control over what's going to happen if you let those through the gate and use your tongue. But after you speak, your words master you.
That is so true.
So we have to become a master of our heart so that we're not allowing dangerous words to escape.
And is it James who says if a person can conquer their own tongue, they're greater than the one who conquers a city.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So let's be conquerors. So, well, our time is gone. There was so much more I know we wanted to talk about. But,
I hope this helped.
Yeah.
And like we said at the beginning, we need to read these precious portions and pray that God would reveal the spirit of what he's saying and not get hung up on the letter of these words so that we hurt each other with our tongue.
Right, exactly. Exactly right. Well, I guess we just have to stop somewhere, and this is it.
All right.
So until next time, shalom.
Shalom, everybody.
And
Bye-bye.
God bless.
Thank you for joining us for today's teaching. If the work of Torah Today Ministries has touched your life, please consider making a donation or sponsoring an upcoming video. As a video sponsor, you'll have an exclusive opportunity to memorialize a family member, celebrate a special event, or simply support the ongoing creation of similar content. Your tax-deductible contribution helps ensure that our teachings continue to reach all who are longing for truth. Click the link or visit our website to learn more.